Hello, friends. I am just doing a quick update to kind of give you an idea of what's been going on in my life over the last month, I guess, and also what I've been dealing with. So, if you've been following along on my channel, then you've seen that I've been releasing a couple of videos each week. And most of those videos I actually recorded earlier, like in the end of May, and then posted through June. And so I haven't recorded an actual video in like a month or more. And that's been because I have been shifted back into my survival mode state. And I've been learning a lot more, like what that looks like for me and what the repercussions are of that. And so my husband had 3 heart attacks back in September of 25, and he was only 37 years old at the time, so it was kind of very scary. And he struggled to recover from his heart attacks, just continuous like fatigue, shortness of breath, dizziness, just continuously, like it didn't go away. And in May, things had gotten worse. And so we thankfully talked to a friend of ours who's a cardiac nurse and then works in the medical world doing medical research. And we just shared with her like what was going on with Josiah. And she gave us wisdom on like what we can ask and what tests we need to get done and all that stuff. And so we did connect with her, and she gave us some really, really good insight on what we can do, what we should do. And so when we met with the cardiologist, well, then they heard what we said and ordered a bunch of tests and stuff. So he had some med changes. He had an EKG, which is a electrical measure of his heart to make sure that there was no electrical problems. Because if you don't know, the heart basically runs on two systems, which one is electricity and the other is plumbing. And so like the heart gets electric impulses that make it beat. So if there's a problem with the electric impulses, then the electricity will have a problem. And that's where someone might need like a pacemaker to keep the pace going. And then the plumbing has to do with the arteries and how the blood is flowing to the muscle of the heart from the outside. Because the heart is a valve which pushes, a valve or a pump, I guess, kind of both, that pushes blood to the lungs to get oxygenated and then sends it around the body. And so it's full of blood, but the heart actually needs its own blood supply, which it does not get from what it pumps. So there are arteries on the outside of the muscle that feed it. And when they get filled up with plaque, then that's how someone can have a heart attack. And so my husband, his got filled up with plaque and he had a heart attack. So they checked the electricity and everything was good. They changed some medication, they did some blood work, and then he had a stress test done, and a nuclear stress test, which basically means that they inject you with like this radioactive solution and you run. And so they take pictures of your heart at a rested state with the radioactive solution, and then they have you run or like walk or run until you get to like a certain point where your heart is beating really fast. And I think his had to be up to like 150 beats per minute. And then they inject you with 3 times the amount of the radioactive stuff, and then they make you run for a whole minute with that at that speed, which he told me he's like he wanted it to be done. That minute is like it took forever, but they do that, and then they take new images of your heart to see how the increased like stress on your heart from having to pump more blood while you're exercising, how that changes. And his stress test showed that he was having right-sided limited blood to his heart, and his coronary artery on the right side is where he had had his heart attack and where he had a stent placed. And so that was super stressful. So from the moment that happened, which was like June 8th, then because he had that result, then they had to do an angiogram again, which is where they go in through your artery, either in your wrist or in your groin area. And they use this catheter tube that's like a camera. No, it's not a camera. It's a catheter tube, and it releases radioactive stuff into your heart, a dye or contrast dye, not radioactive, but a contrast dye into your heart. And then they take x-rays while it's releasing to see where if at all, when the dye is released, if it isn't getting anywhere. And so they did that. And when he had his heart attack, his right coronary artery was blocked at 95%. So it was a pretty big deal. Well, then when they redid this, it showed to be fine. So then that was all within about a week. And then he had a hard time. My husband had a hard time recovering. They said on the angiogram that everything was good. So they couldn't explain why he was having the symptoms he was having. Well, then we went, so he basically got out of that, and they're like, we don't know why you're having the symptoms you're having. So that was stressful. And then I was really, if I'm honest, like I was really nervous that he was going to die during the stent placement. And so if he had to have a stent placed, and so I was really nervous about that. And I think that's where part of my shutdown happened, I guess. And then after that, he ended up going and seeing a rheumatologist, and they diagnosed him with psoriatic arthritis. And we actually found out, so my husband has psoriasis on his skin, and he's been using a biologic, which is an injection that helps your body to produce like its own natural genes and DNA and things that it's not producing when you have this illness. And so he was taking Stelara, and then got changed to the like great value version, Stellarsd. And then he was having just horrible, he's had joint pain forever, and he's just had issues with his joints forever. I won't get into it. If you know, you know, Tobey Maguire. But anyway, he was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. So when people have the skin psoriasis issues, then 1 in 3 of them will develop psoriatic arthritis, which is different than atherosclerosis arthritis, which that is basically when people are getting older, their collagen in their joints will rub away. And so then when they have arthritis, they actually, it's like bone on bone rubbing. So it's really painful. This kind of arthritis is different, with a buildup of calcium and inflammation. And so it is very treatable in comparison to joint, you'd have to have your joint replaced with the other kind of arthritis. And so he was diagnosed with that. And we did find out, interestingly enough, that people who have psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis there's like a connected gene that causes coronary artery disease. And so that was very interesting for us. And it led me to like wonder, do Filipinos, because my husband is Filipino, do they have a higher prevalence of psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, and coronary artery disease? Because that was a shocking revelation that all 3 of those things are connected. And so I guess I encourage anybody who's watching this, if you have psoriasis, or you know someone who has psoriasis and they end up having psoriatic arthritis, have them get their what's the word? Not calcium, cholesterol checked and see, because there could be a correlation there. So that, and then after his angiogram, like 2 weeks after, he still wasn't healed. He missed work and was like just really struggling. So then we thought that maybe he had a small hematoma at his site, which is basically like when you're on a blood thinner, which he is because of his coronary artery disease and his stent that's placed. It's actually an antiplatelet, but it's kind of the same thing. Like it stops your body from clotting the same way that it naturally would. When you're on one of those and you have these angiograms then go through your artery to your heart, there's a possibility that when they close the artery, especially the one in the groin, if it doesn't close all the way, that you can have a slow leak of blood from your artery into the site where you had the angiogram inserted. And so he did have a bump there, and we were nervous for him. So he went in, and it turned out that it was a swollen lymph node. It wasn't actually a hematoma, which they told us, like, when you see a hematoma, it's like a big bump under the skin. So we didn't know. We were just nervous, So then, yeah, now it's been like 3 weeks since that last experience. And I had been realizing for about a month that my hair was falling out. My hair was just really coming out, like almost anytime I run my hands through it, I'm getting just gobs of hair coming out. And I started researching and realized like when you go into shock, your body pulls all of your like life energy, I guess you could say, all of the attention that it's giving to growth and health and whatever else to your vital organs. So then your hair obviously is not a priority when it comes to survival. Like if your hair falls out, it's okay. And so when you go into shock, your body literally pulls all of that attention away from external things like your skin, your nails, your hair, even your fingers, your feet, and it really just focuses on your internal vital organs. And I had already known that I was struggling with staying present emotionally because I was just numb. I had gotten to the point where I left any semblance of femininity, which feminine energy, if you don't know what that is, it's basically like the ability to stay present. It's the ability to access and share your emotions, to stay soft, to ask what you need. And for me, those are the main things that I'm focusing on with femininity, is like those are the things that I need to grow in before I even explore anymore. And masculine energy is like when you're fighting for yourself, when you are protecting yourself, when you're taking care of everything, you're on autopilot, fight zone, you're dealing with everything, you're not asking for help, you're not feeling, you're just getting through. I've realized in the past that when I have medical emergencies, that's how I deal with it, partially because of my experiences of abuse and the trauma that I've experienced with the medical system, but then also because of my training as a nurse and a mental health crisis worker. Like, you have to be able to compartmentalize what what this interaction or this experience was in order to keep going. And because of my dissociative struggles, I'm a master at that. Like, I'm so skilled. If you have a good skill, if it was good, it'd be great. And in some ways it is really good, but it's not it's not desirable when it happens automatically. Like, you don't have control over it. So in the working field, I can choose to step into this different compartment of myself and to be present and to be able to handle and take care of what comes up. But when it comes to my personal life, I I struggle with that, and I go automatically into disconnection. And some people might not really understand what that means, and so I will try to explain it to you from my own like personal experience. For me, when I go into what I would call survival mode, my masculine energy, disconnection, dissociation, what happens is I feel completely disconnected from my emotions. Like, there's nothing. It's just hard. I just feel hard internally, almost like there's a wall or protection there that keeps me from ever feeling the fear, the nervousness, the sadness, the grief, whatever it is. It just completely shuts down. And then the other thing is, um, depending on the level of the experience I'm having, I can actually like disconnect from my body. And what that means is, like, I'll be in my head, like I'm not leaving my body and floating around, but I will live my life in my head, so much so that I'm like unaware of my body from the neck down. And like when I'm really struggling, I can actually like just pinch myself anywhere and I'll hardly feel it. There was one time when I was trying to like stay alive and I was trying to focus on this stuff. I just met this really sweet girl fishing. So that's who I was waving at. I was trying to focus on stuff and I actually gave myself a sternum rub because I was like, I don't feel my body. And even when I did the sternum rub, I didn't feel it. So if you work in the medical field or you know about sternum rubs, you know that typically they're very painful. Like, that's what doctors and nurses and police officers and EMTs and paramedics will do when they come up upon someone and they're trying to see if they can wake them up. They'll do a sternum rub, which is basically like take your fist like this and then rub it down your sternum, which is your breastbone, and they just rub it there really hard. And when I did that, I felt I could kind of feel it like numbly. Like, I could feel it kind of like when you go to the dentist and you get your teeth numbed and then they're working on stuff, like you can feel it's happening, but you don't feel it. That's how it felt for me. I woke up the next day and I had a bruise on my sternum and I still didn't feel it. And so that was actually the first time that I recognized, like, oh wow, this must be what, maybe, like, there's different people who cut, that engage in that behavior, self-harm. And some people, I do believe they do it just for like attention, and they do it in places where everyone will see it and they make a big deal about it, but it's always really superficial. It's not significant. But I have, working in mental health, I have worked with people who cut very like drastically. Like they will do it in places where no one sees, and then I'm talking like cut like deep, like you need stitches, you need to glue them together. And I remember one woman I had worked with, she chronically comes in for assessments. She struggles with depression, and the one time she had come in and she had cut into her calf, and it was like that deep. And like I just was shocked by it, because you could see her skin and the tissue and everything. And when I had asked her, she said, I just want to feel something. And so that night when I did that sternum rub, it was kind of the first time that I realized, like, oh, I think this is maybe what people are experiencing. And I have never really done self-harm. I mean, when I was a kid, I did, if you guys ever saw like the eraser burns, I did that because I thought it was cool. And then I didn't, my older brother and his friends were like lighting a lighter and getting it super hot, and then they'd put it on their wrist and like literally burn themselves like a brand. I saw that and thought about it and was like, nah, I don't want to do that. So I've never really done that. So I don't fully understand it. But what I will say is that I do believe that if you struggle with that depth of numbness and dissociation and disconnection from yourself and from your body, that there are ways to heal, and that there are ways to recover, reconnect with your body so that you can feel again without having to harm yourself. And I'm going to, try to share some of that